Hey everyone, and welcome back to a deep dive. It's really awesome getting all the source material you send our way, covering everything from, well, all sorts of stuff. Today, we're diving into something way more practical for a lot of you, I think. If you're wrestling with automation workflows, maybe using an N8N and spending just way too much time figuring out why things aren't working, this one's for you. We got this great article, 4 hidden N8N errors that waste your time, and quick fixes to solve them, and it's got some really good stuff in it.
Yeah, it really pinpoints some common pitfalls, the kind that, make you want to pull your hair out sometimes. Because the workflow looks right, but it just won't cooperate. The article promises these are the mistakes that can waste hours, maybe even days. But once you know about them, the fixes are surprisingly pretty fast. It's all about getting automation to actually save you time, right? Not create more headaches.
Totally, yeah. So our mission today is to really unpack these 4 specific errors the article highlights. We want to understand why they happen, what they look like in practice, and most importantly, nail down those quick fixes the source provides. We're going to dive right in and try to extract those core insights for you.
And, understanding these isn't just about debugging one tricky workflow. It's kind of bigger than that. It's about building more robust, reliable automation systems right from the start. It's about getting those fundamentals down that make a big difference in the long run.
Okay, let's unpack the first big one the article calls out. It's dealing with messy, unstructured text data.
Right.
Like imagine you're getting customer inquiries through email or maybe a basic web form, and all the details, the person's name, their email address, the actual message are just jumbled together in one big block of text. You need to pull just the name or just the email out automatically. How do you even begin to do that effectively?
Nods slowly. That's a classic challenge, isn't it? A really common one. People often go down the road of trying complex pattern matching, like regular expressions, regex. And the source points out that while regex can work sometimes, it's often pretty rigid. It really struggles with variations in how people phrase things or, format their text. Plus, let's be honest, regex can be kind of intimidating to learn and maintain.
Right. Oh, yeah. And the article has this really interesting solution here, something you might not immediately think of for this task. It's using ChatGPT, but not really for conversation. It's using it as a data parser. Here's where it gets kind of cool.
Exactly. The source lays out a pretty simple process for setting this up in an N8N ChatGPT node. You basically tell the AI its job using the system message. You say something like, your task is to extract specific information like first name, last name, email, and the customer's message from the text I provide.
Okay, so that's like the job description for the AI. Then the messy text goes into the user message field, right? That's your input.
Precisely. That's where you feed it the actual email body or the form submission text, whatever it is. And the absolute key, the real trick from the article, is the assistant message. This is where you provide a blank JSON template that shows ChatGPT the exact structure you want the output in, like first name, last name, email, message.
Oh, okay. So you're not just asking it to extract info, you're showing it how to structure the extracted info. That makes sense. The article even mentions you can ask ChatGPT itself to generate that blank JSON template for you by just describing the variables you need. That's pretty cool.
It really is a neat shortcut, and the final critical step the source mentions for this node is making sure the output content as JSON setting is turned on. This ensures ChatGPT formats its response strictly as JSON. Once it processes the unstructured text, you get back clean, structured data in that JSON format you specified.
In that clean JSON data.
Yeah.
That's going to be super easy to then use in other nodes, like mapping it directly into columns in a Google Sheet, or maybe fields in a CRM node.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is how it leverages AI's natural language understanding. It can deal with variations, typos, or just different phrasing in a way that traditional rule-based methods like regex just can't really handle well. It's just way more flexible for real-world messy text.
So if you're spending ages manually copying and pasting info from emails or form submissions, or maybe struggling with complex text formulas, using ChatGPT as a data parser like this, guided by a JSON template, think about where you deal with unstructured text, emails, support tickets, maybe online reviews. This method, according to the source, could save you a ton of manual work or complex setup. That's like a major aha moment for how to use AI differently.
It's a total paradigm shift for text processing and automation, really.
All right, let's move on to mistake number 2 the article identifies. This one's about Google Sheets. Super common tool. Say you've got customer data, maybe those leads you just parsed, neatly in a sheet. You want to build an interactive system where you can check a box next to a customer's name, maybe like a ready to contact box, and have that instantly trigger an action in N8N, like adding them to an email sequence or something? How do you make N8N actively listen for that specific checkmark change happening right there in the sheet? People often get stuck wanting N8N to constantly check the sheet.
This is a really common scenario where people hit a wall. They want that immediate reaction, right? That connection between a human action in the sheet and the automated workflow, but they don't know how to create it efficiently. N8N isn't designed to just sit there constantly asking Google Sheets, "Did anything change? How about now? Now, every few seconds."
Right, that would be incredibly inefficient, lots of wasted resources. So the source's solution here sounds a bit technical at first glance, combining webhooks with a little bit of Google Apps script, which might make some people's eyes glaze over initially, but the article insists it's actually easier than it sounds.
It really is much simpler in practice than the names might suggest. The article uses a great analogy. Think of a webhook as a special phone number assigned to your N8N workflow. Instead of your workflow constantly calling Google Sheets asking for updates, you give Google Sheets this special number. Then you set up a tiny piece of code in Google Sheets using AppScript that basically says, hey, if anything gets edited here, call this phone number, the webhook URL, and tell N8N about it.
Gotcha. So Google Sheets becomes the one making the call when something relevant happens, instead of N8N polling constantly. Much more efficient and instantaneous.
Exactly, that's the key. The steps from the article are: first, you set up a webhook node in N8N. It gives you a unique URL. That's your special phone number. You copy that. Then you go into your Google Sheet, find extensions in the menu, and click Apps Script. This opens up a script editor right in your browser.
And you paste a specific piece of JavaScript code that the article provides, right? There's usually a template for this, making sure to replace a placeholder in the code with that unique webhook URL you copied from N8N.
Correct. That code typically uses the onEdit function, which is triggered automatically whenever the sheet is edited. And it uses something called URLFetchApp.Fetch to send the data about the edit to your N8N webhook URL. Once the code is in, you just set up a simple onEdit trigger within the AppScript environment itself, usually by clicking a little clock icon over on the side. This just makes sure that onEdit function runs every time someone edits the sheet.
Okay. And then back in N8N, after the webhook node receives the information about the edit, you need a way to make sure the workflow only continues if the right thing happened. Like not just any edit, but that specific checkbox getting checked.
Precisely. That's absolutely crucial. That's where you add a filter node immediately after the webhook node in your N8N workflow. The data sent by the app script usually includes details about the edit, which cell changed, what the new value is, maybe the old value too. You configure the filter node to check for specific conditions. Did the change happen in, say, column E? And was the new value true, or whatever your specific condition is?
Oh, right. Because you don't want any random edit in the sheet, like fixing a typo, to trigger your important email workflow. Just checking that specific box, that filter is key.
Absolutely. It's the gatekeeper. Without it, just saving the sheet or typing anything could potentially trigger your workflow, which you definitely don't want.
Wow, okay. So that combination, the N8N webhook node getting the call, the simple app script making the call on edit, and the N8N filter node checking the specific condition. That's how you create that instant interactive connection. You can then add whatever action node you want after the filter, like a Google Mail node to send an email or maybe create a task in your project management tool. That unlocks building truly responsive systems driven by actions directly in your spreadsheet. That's pretty powerful.
It really connects the dots between human interaction within a common tool like Sheets and sophisticated automated workflows in a very powerful real-time way.
All right, mistake number 3. The source talks about people hitting a wall or maybe just feeling intimidated when they encounter the HTTP request node in N8N. It just looks kind of technical, right? Like maybe there's this fear of HTTP requests.
Yeah, it can definitely seem like this scary, abstract thing you should probably just avoid if you can. But here's the reality, and the article points this out really clearly. Every single pre-built integration node you use in N8N, the Google Sheets node, the Slack node, the Telegram node, whatever it is, they're all just pre-packaged, simplified HTTP requests under the hood.
Oh, really? So when I'm using like a Google Sheets node to add a row, N8N is basically just formatting and sending an HTTP request to Google's system behind the scenes.
Exactly. It's just dressed up in a nice, user-friendly interface with specific fields for you. And so when you need to connect to a service that doesn't have one of those nice pre-built nodes, you have to use the generic HTTP request node. That's fundamentally how systems talk to each other over the internet by making these kinds of requests.
Okay, so it's fundamental, not just something for like coding experts. Huh. But how do you figure out what request to send? That looks super complicated with URLs and headers and bodies and authentication and all that stuff.
That is the pain point, figuring out all those specifics. And the source offers a great solution to make it way, way less scary. It involves leveraging the service's API documentation and using the import curl feature within the N8N HTTP request node itself.
API documentation.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds even more scary, maybe scarier than HTTP.
Calmly. Let's go back to the article's analogy. It's a good one. Think of an API application programming interface as the waiter in a restaurant. You, your N8N workflow, are the customer. The service you want to talk to, like an SMS sending service or maybe an AI voice generator like 11 Labs, which the article mentions that service is the kitchen. You don't need to go into the kitchen and figure out how they make the food. You just look at the menu, that's the API documentation, and tell the waiter, the API, what you want to order.
Okay, waiter analogy helps. The API docs are the menu. So the HTTP request is how I place my order with the waiter from the menu.
Precisely. And the brilliant shortcut that the article reveals is that most API documentation, most menus, include examples of how to make requests using something called curl. Curl is just a common command line tool for making HTTP requests. The examples in the API docs will look like a line of code starting with the word curl, something like the example the source gives. Curl-x pst summary.h header info-d data payload. You don't need to understand what all the curl command arguments mean.
Right, okay. The article says you just find that example request in the service's API documentation, look for sections called API reference or developer docs, or just examples showing curl, and you copy that entire line of code.
That's the magic part. You copy the whole thing, the whole curl command. Then you go back to the HTTP request node in N8N. Instead of manually filling in the URL, the method, like posty, putty, etc., the headers, the body data, which is super tedious and really error-prone, you just find the import curl option in the node settings, paste the curl code you copied, and hit import.
And N8N automatically parses that curl command and populates most of the fields in the node for you, like the URL, the method, headers.
Yes, it's a massive time saver and honestly an error reducer. N8N figures out the URL, the HTTP method, parity, GT, etc., puts the right stuff in the header section and formats the data for the body section, all from that one line of curl code.
Wow. That is a major shortcut, seriously. So you don't have to manually figure out all those technical fields. The only thing you usually do have to add yourself, according to the article, is the authentication part, right? Like your personal API key or maybe a token.
Right. Authentication is usually unique to your account, so it's typically not included in the generic curl example you find in the docs. You'll need to add that manually, usually in the authentication tab of the node or sometimes as a specific header, just following the specific instructions in that service's API documentation, the menu. But importing the curl takes care of like 90% of the complexity. It completely unlocks your ability to connect to literally thousands of services that don't have pre-built N8N nodes, all just by knowing where to find the curl example and how to import it. Suddenly, no more fear of the HTTP request node.
Okay, that makes it way less scary. So
Sure.
find the API docs, spot the curl example, copy it, import into N8N. That's the trick. That's huge.
Precisely. It democratizes API access quite a bit.
All right, last one. And the source calls this the silent killer. This is something that apparently causes huge frustration because your workflow looks logically correct. You set up everything right step by step, but it just doesn't work. Often with really vague errors or sometimes no error messages at all. It just fails silently.
Yeah.
The article says this is often caused by not understanding JSON data types.
This is absolutely fundamental for reliable workflows. And yeah, it's subtle. The problem isn't necessarily the data itself, like the value true or the number 123. It's about how that data is formatted and stored, its type. If a node expects one type of data, like a number, but it receives another type, like text, it can behave unpredictably or just fail silently. The article breaks down the 5 main data types in JSON, and importantly, how N8N helps you visualize them with little icons.
Okay, let's quickly go over the 5 main types mentioned and what they look like in N8N based on the article. First, string, which is just text.
Right, that's just plain text data, like a name, Nguyen Manam was the example, an address, an email. In N8N, you'll see a little A icon next to it, representing text.
Number, pretty straightforward.
Yep. For numerical data, you can actually do calculations with, like an age, 34, a quantity, 100, or maybe a price, 100.5. That gets a hashtag icon in N8N.
Okay. Boolean, which is true or false.
And this is crucial. This is the actual Boolean value, true or false, always lowercase, no quotes. In AN, it has a distinctive on-off switch icon. This is critically different from the text strings true or false, which would have quotes if you saw them raw, and importantly, they get the A icon in AN.
Okay, so the text true with an A icon is completely different from the Boolean true with the switch icon. Got it. That seems important.
Exactly. And that distinction causes so many subtle problems in workflows.
Okay, then there's object.
That's like a container for related data. It holds a collection of key value pairs, often represented by curly braces in JSON. Think of it like a folder holding related pieces of information, like all of a customer's contact details together.
And finally, array.
That's simply a list, an ordered collection of items, often represented by square brackets in JSON, like a list of tags, maybe urgent, follow-up, or a list of items in an online order.
Okay, so string in A, number, hashtag, Boolean switch, object, array. And the article gives that super clear example of why types matter. Number 2 plus number 2 equals 4, but the text 2 plus the text 2 equals 22. Totally different outcomes depending on the type.
Yes, it's fundamental to how programming and automation handle data manipulation and comparison. And the most common frustrating example, that silent killer the source points out, is exactly that filter condition check we talked about earlier. If you have a filter node checking, if a value called, say, is verified equals the Boolean true, expecting the switch icon.
But the data coming into that node actually has is verified stored as the text string true, which would show up with the A icon, instead of the actual Boolean true with the switch icon.
Exactly. The filter condition is verified equals true will always evaluate to false, even though you're looking right at the data and it says true. You'll be sitting there for hours, maybe days, thinking your logic is broken or the filter node is buggy. It's because you're comparing a text string to a Boolean value, and they are simply not the same thing to the computer. You might get a weird error sometimes, but often you just get no output from the filter node and you have no idea why.
Oh man, I can totally see how that would be a silent killer. It looks right to the human eye, but fails fundamentally for the machine. That's got to be maddening. So the fix the article gives is actually pretty simple once you know what to look for. Pay attention to the data type icons in NA.
Precisely. This is the core insight here. N8N explicitly shows you the icons next to the data in the output panel. If you see an A icon when you were expecting an on-off switch icon for a true-false check, or maybe a hashtag when you needed an A, you immediately know you likely have a data type mismatch issue. That's probably your problem.
And the solution isn't usually writing complicated code to fix it right. The article says many nodes, like the filter node or maybe the set node, have a built-in convert types option.
Yes. Often it's just a checkbox. You just turn that on, and N8N will often automatically try to convert the incoming data type to match what the node expects or what you specify in the node's settings. So it can try converting the text true to the Boolean true, or maybe the text 123 to the number 123 before the filter or calculation happens.
Wow. Just knowing to look at those little icons, the A, the hashtag, the switch, the brackets, the braces, and knowing that a mismatch is probably the problem if things aren't working. And that there's often a simple convert types checkbox that it feels absolutely fundamental to building reliable workflows. It can fix so many of those frustrating, head-scratching problems that give you no clear error messages.
It truly is a critical shift in perspective when you're debugging. Don't just look at the values, look at the types. Pay attention to those icons.
Okay, so we've unpacked the 4 big ones the article says cause the most pain. The messy text data issue and using ChatGPT to parse it cleanly. Struggling to track Google Sheets changes instantly, and how webhooks combined with AppScript provide that real-time trigger. Being intimidated by HTTP requests, but using the brilliant import curl trick to simplify things massively. And finally, the frustrating silent killer of not understanding JSON data types and the importance of checking those little icons in N8N.
Right. These are presented in the article as the most common sources of major frustration, the things that really waste time. But as we've discussed, the good news is once you identify them, the fixes aren't usually overly complex. And understanding these core issues helps you build much more predictable and reliable automation systems from the get-go. They let you build workflows that actually work consistently, not just sometimes.
Yeah, because like we said right at the top, automation is supposed to save you time, not make you spend days or weeks debugging. Avoiding these common mistakes the article points out should really help your workflows actually deliver on that promise for you.
So, maybe as a final thought for you to mull over, drawing from the source, out of these 4 potential pitfalls the article outlines: the messy text extraction, the Google Sheet tracking setup, the fear of HTTP requests, or the JSON data type confusion. Which one feels most relevant to challenges you've personally faced in your own automation work, or maybe anticipate facing soon? Thinking about that specific area and really focusing on applying the fix or the approach we discussed, where could understanding just that one thing potentially save you the most time and frustration right now moving forward? It's just something to consider, I guess.
That's a really good point to consider. A great takeaway. This has been a super insightful deep dive into some really practical N8N problem-solving techniques. Thanks again for sharing the source material that made this possible. Really valuable stuff.
Always interesting to unpack these practical insights and find those aha moments that can make a real difference.
Definitely. Keep exploring, keep automating, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
Sounds good. See ya.